Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Phew, but we're all here. My name is Krista Seringo, and I'm the chair of the Community Engagement Committee for the Mount Abe School Board. And I'm really appreciative of all of you being here, being patient. I'd like to introduce the two people who are going to facilitate this evening's meeting. So Sue McCormick has been working with our district for the past few years. She's a professional facilitator. And Shannon Worden, who is the principal of the Mount Abe Middle and High School, is also here to help us this evening. So I'd like to just start by letting Shannon do a few tech housekeeping items, which we might have already totally addressed, but if not, go ahead.
We might have worked through some glitches already. So if you haven't done so already, if you can mute your computer, it'll show up as a little icon in the very bottom left-hand corner of your screen if you're on a computer, and it just says mute and unmute. And when you need to speak, just hit unmute and we'll call on you. We'll utilize the chat box for questions and to call on folks if you have something that you would like to say, but we will not use the chat box for side conversations because folks that are in the room won't be able to see your chats. And what we will do for facilitation is we will take questions from the group in the cafeteria and then go to Zoom and call on folks from the Zoom. So if you look at your name on your little window there, and it's not what you want to be called, you can change it by hovering over the image, and there are 3 dots at the top, and if you click on those, it will allow you to rename and go ahead and put whatever you would like us to call you in there, and that's what we'll see and use to call on you. And if you have any questions or trouble hearing us or anything, please put something in the chat, wave your hands, and I'll see you and we'll address your questions or problems.
Okay, great. So I wanted to provide a little bit of a backstory as to why we've invited you all here this evening, and to provide some context for the conversation we hope to have. So we are, as you all know, we're at a pretty epic moment and experiencing things that most of us have never experienced in our lifetime. The COVID pandemic has brought with us many, many acute challenges. And yet before COVID, our school system was facing chronic challenges for several years at least.
Krista, can you come a little closer to the microphone?
Sure.
Just speak up really loud.
Okay. So our school district's really been grappling with how best to give our kids the education that we believe they deserve at a cost that we can all afford. And these challenges have really not gone away since the pandemic. In fact, they've been exacerbated. So we shared a handout in advance of the meeting that really goes into a lot of detail about those challenges, but I'd like to just share a little bit of more about some of those details. So in the 2014-2015 school year, we had about 1,497 students, so just under 1,500 students. Before COVID, for the 2021 school year, we anticipated having about 1,320. So that would be a decline of about 177 students in about 6 years. With the pandemic, we anticipate another 20 to 30 students unenrolling and choosing to home study instead. So that brings us to a reduction within a 6-year time period of between 197 and 207 students. So that loss of students equals a pretty significant loss of revenue. Our expenses have also been increasing every year due to inflation, but also due to costs like increases in healthcare insurance and salaries and other fixed costs. So this means that the amount we're spending per student is increasing every year, even if we're budget neutral. Theoretically, we could raise enough money to meet that budget gap if we increased our property taxes. But it's our sense that not many of us have the appetite to do that. Even if a community did want to tackle the problem that way, the state is establishing a spending threshold that is an effort to contain costs in a way that if we go above the spending threshold, we are penalized $1 for every dollar above that threshold. And so as a board and administration, we've felt that that's not something that we wanted to do. So the school board and the administration has known for some time and has been trying to share with the community that we are in this position of having to make increasingly difficult decisions. And we're getting closer and closer to the time when, if we don't do some things differently soon, we are going to need to chip away at the programs and services that provide our kids with the education that we believe they deserve. So this past fall, which now it's almost a year ago, hard to believe, we brought together our community for a series of conversations throughout the 5 towns, and I think and hope many of you were part of those. We really wanted to know what matters to people with respect to education. What are the things we as a community collectively can agree that we think our kids deserve out of the education they receive? We also wanted to share these challenges that I'm outlining today and the impact that's having on our budget, as well as our ability to maintain our facilities. Most of them, particularly the one that some of us are in this evening, are aging and need significant maintenance to maintain. So this fall, with those conversations, we developed a list of shared education values, and we also looked at a variety of different facility scenarios. And the board decided in the early part of 2020 to hire some folks at the New England School Development Council to explore those facilities scenarios a little more deeply. And we're hoping to have a report back from that group in early August. We also heard from that work in the fall that the community was really interested in exploring some other issues that would probably not be tackled by a facilities consultant and are really beyond the scope of what the school board and administration has the capacity to address on their own. So these issues that arose to the top of our conversations: one, how could we work together to bring more people into the 5-town area and improve our demographic trend? 2, can we explore school community partnerships and see our schools as community centers? And 3, could we mobilize to advocate with the legislature for changes in our education policy that would better support schools in addressing these challenges? So before COVID, our board had decided, and the Community Engagement Committee in particular, had decided that while the facilities consultants were doing their work, that we would try to convene a group of community leaders and elected officials to talk about those 3 issues and others that might emerge, where we thought there might be some shared concern and some interest in collaborating. And then we have the pandemic, and we have calls for racial justice, and we have increased political polarization. And our group decided that we needed to still, and now maybe more than ever, have this conversation with our community. The challenges before COVID, they're chronic, they're not going away. The issues that COVID has shed light on are also ones that need to be attended to. So we see this as an opportunity to have a conversation. The school board decided to host this really as a generative session to convene people to brainstorm how we collectively might want to think about these issues that affect our schools, but that can be seen in other aspects of our community as well. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. And again, thank you for being here, and I'd like to introduce Sue McCormick, who's going to share our agenda for the evening.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be with you. This is very different than the last time that I was here with the community. And I just appreciate everyone's patience as we try to navigate this dual technology. And so we're going to do the best that we can. So as Krista said, she gave a really nice overview of the kind of school-specific issues that brought us to this moment. But also the Community Engagement Committee wanted to create a space for a generative conversation that may talk a lot about school issues, but it may not. There might be other things that feel really important right now. So we tried to create an agenda to help us have a conversation like that. And I'm just going to share my screen for just a minute so that we can just show you a little bit about what we're hoping to do together tonight. So first, the purpose to this is to, in a broad way, to take stock of some of the challenges and the opportunities facing the 5 towns, given all that's happening, this extraordinary moment that we're in. And just for this group of community leaders to have a chance to kind of set aside a lot of the really urgent work that you're all doing and just have this time to explore whether there's some opportunities for collaborative action to help your 5 towns. So for the agenda, we're just going to do some introductions. We're going to give you a chance to talk in small groups about what the community is facing and what your, how the pandemic and our current situation has affected you personally, has impacted the community. Then we'll come back together as a whole group and talk a little bit about what you all are hearing from your community. I know many of you are leaders in different sectors of the community. I thought it would be useful for you all to hear from each other what different people are talking about. And then we're going to do one more small group piece of work where people generate some possible action ideas about how we might respond. What are some of the opportunities? So to help us do our work together, we just have some suggested agreements. So first, of course, we have to be mindful that we're working in 2 spaces, in person and remote. And we really want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak and be heard. So the folks on Zoom, as well as the people who are here in the room. So we're just going to do our best to navigate that. If people on Zoom have concerns that they're not being heard, let us know. We're so lucky to have Shannon with us tonight to help navigate that. We just want to make sure that all ideas that get put out get a fair hearing tonight. This is a generative meeting. It's okay to disagree as long as we focus on the issues, not people. I was in a meeting with someone from Chicago earlier today, and their ground rule was throw glitter, not shade. You're working with some young people in Chicago. Same idea. As much as possible, we ask that we try to be present. So I know at home there can be a lot of distractions, but if we can try to just be together for this period of time, that would be great. And then also the technology, just to mute your mic when you're not speaking, so there's not a lot of background. And I hope everybody is okay with those. So can we get a thumbs up in the room? And maybe a thumbs up on Zoom. Shannon, are people looking like they're good with that? Yep. Okay, great. So let's transition to some introductions. And we just quickly want to see who is with us tonight. So we're going to ask people to just share your name, the town you live in, and your connection with your community. You may have multiple connections, that's fine, but if you serve on the select board or the school board or you're a teacher, just something like that, so we have a sense of who's here. And we're going to start with people that are with us on Zoom tonight. And Shannon, I think you'll just call on people to make that go well. And can we change the view here so we can see everybody? And then we'll have people in the room as well. We start. I'll keep playing with this. Okay. So, Cheryl, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Cheryl Mitchell. I live in New Haven on the far western 5 towns. Back where in the olden days, people used to choose which schools they would send their kids to. I guess I'm here. I've had 2 kids go through the school system. I have some grandchildren on the way. And I'm with the Early Care and Learning Partnership with Tree Eleven Inc. and also with the Addison County Economic Recovery Group.
And Valerie?
I'm Valerie Caples. I'm the town administrator for Bristol. I do not live in Bristol. I don't have children, so I don't have that experience of putting children through the system or the school system. But I'm interested in listening and to think of ways that perhaps the town and the school district can collaborate.
Sarah Ruggier.
I am the director at Bristol Family Center, and I'm also the parent of a second grader and a sixth grader at Moncton Central. And I have sat on school board in the past, but not for a few years now.
Thank you. Sue White. You just need to unmute. There should be a button in the lower left. There you go.
Hi, I'm Sue White. I have two sons who graduated from Mount Abe, went through, one of them went through the Lincoln Elementary School. I'm the director at the Quarry Hill School in Middlebury, which is a pre-K, and I'm one of the co-leaders of the Addison County Early Childhood Directors Network. So bringing the voice of early care and learning to the table.
Thank you. Kim Callahan.
Hi, everyone. Kim Callahan. I live in New Haven, and I have, we have two girls that went through the school system and have graduated, and I'm part of the Community Engagement Committee and was also part of the Five-Town Learning Network that got together after the third bond vote was not passed, and tried to bring the community together to find ways to move forward for the kids in the school and the community. So it's great to see everybody here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Richard Fazy.
Hi, Richard Fazy from Starksboro. We had two daughters that went through the Mount Abe school system. I'm the chair of the Energy Committee in Starksboro in this capacity.
Thank you. Paul Forlenza.
Hi, I'm Paul Forlenza. I'm on the select board in Lincoln, longtime resident. Kids are both grown. On the select board, we're interested in having more conversations with especially the two board members that represent Lincoln, and to have a closer connection to the Lincoln Elementary School.
Great, thank you. Bill Finger.
I'm Bill Finger. I'm on the select board in Lincoln.
Thank you. Sarah McLean.
Hi, Sarah McLean. I am on the school board. I represent Lincoln, and I have two daughters that are going to be in 4th and 7th grades.
Thank you. Adora.
Hi, I'm Adora Fraser. I'm the principal of Robinson School in Starksboro.
Taylor Welch.
Hi, I'm Taylor Welch. I'm the director of the Bristol Hub Teen Center in Bristol, and I'm a resident of Bristol.
Thank you. Mary Kate Kelly.
Hi, I'm on the Moncton Select Board. I'm a former school board member and former Vermont school board member. I've had students in school in the district, and one who'll be attending 8th grade next year. Or sorry, 9th grade. Ha.
Thank you. Steve, I don't see your last name, but you appear to be sitting in a very comfy chair. If you could just unmute. And you're still muted. So lower left-hand corner of your screen should say unmute.
Okay, let's try that.
There we go.
I am Steve Dupois. I am an alumni of Mount Abe, 1971. I have 3 children that have gone through it. I have 6 grandchildren in various stages, 4 of which are still in school. I spent 9 years on the Beeman Elementary School Board where my children were involved there, and I'm in my 6th year on the New Haven Select Board and presently serving as chair.
Thank you. Betsy McDonough Brown.
Hi, I'm Betsy Brown. I live in Moncton. I am on the Development Review Board. And I also have a 2nd grader and a 6th grader at Moncton Central.
Thank you. Meredith McFarland?
My name is Meredith McFarland. I am the Bristol Recreations Director. My mailbox is in Starksboro and my house is in Buellsboro.
Thank you. Porter Knight?
I'm Porter Knight. I'm in Bristol. We had 2 boys go through Bristol Elementary School and graduate from Mount Abe. I'm on the board of the Bristol Recreation Club and the coordinator of the Bristol Trail Network.
Great, thank you. Liz Sayre, I have you next.
Hi, my name is Liz Sayre, and I am the MAUSC Bristol rep.
Thank you. Susan Brule.
Hi, I'm Susan Brule. I'm the Director of Student Support Services for Addison, for Mount Abe Unified School District for students pre-K through 12. I'm also a resident of New Haven. I have 3 children. 2 are graduates of Mount Abe, and I have 1 student who's going to be a junior next year.
Thank you. Darla Senecal. You're still muted, Darla.
Sorry, I pushed the button. There we go. So
perfect.
I live in Bristol. I'm on the Bristol Select Board. I'm also part of the Early Care and Learning Partnership. I work for an organization called Building Bright Futures, which studies the needs of children and families' health and wellness, birth to 8 years old for the state of Vermont. I had 3 sons that went through school. I have 3 grandchildren who are all in schools right now here in Bristol.
Great, thank you. Ian with the Bristol Select Board.
Hi, I'm Ian. I'm on the Bristol Select Board. I live in Bristol. I'm also the Executive Director of Bristol Core, which is Bristol's downtown group. I have 2 young sons who I hope will go through the school system. And so I'm very interested in making sure there is one for them to go through.
Thank you. Rebecca Elder.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Elder. I live in Starksboro and work in the town office. I'm the zoning administrator and I work with the select board as their assistant. I've been involved in the Starksboro sports program for 5 years, and I have 2 boys in the school who are going into 8th grade and went through Robinson.
Great, thank you. Jeff Miller.
I live in Lincoln and I am on the facilities subcommittee.
Thank you. And I'm scanning. See who I haven't called. Katrina DiNapoli.
Hi, I'm Katrina DiNapoli. I live in Moncton. I had 2 kiddos go through the system, and I am the assistant superintendent for the district.
Thank you. Representative Cordes.
Hi, I'm Mari Cordes. I live in Lincoln, representing Addison for 4 towns, not New Haven. I'm also a working nurse at UVM Medical Center and have 2 grown daughters and 2 granddaughters who have, the granddaughters are going through public school now.
Thank you. Senator Bray.
Hi, my name is Chris Bray. I live in Bristol, having just moved here in the last year. Lived 20 years in New Haven before that, where my partner's children both went through Beeman and then off to Mount Abe. I serve in the Senate and represent the towns of Addison County plus Huntington and Buellsboro.
Thank you. Faye Jackson.
Hi, I am a Lincoln resident. I'm on the select board. This is my first year serving with the select board. And I have 3 children. 2 are going into 4th grade and 1 is going into 7th grade. And I myself went to Mount Abe as well.
Thank you. Caleb Elder. Caleb, you're still muted.
Thank you. Still muted. There we go. I live in Starksboro.
I'm Caleb Elder, Mount Abe graduate, and I went to Bristol Elementary School, and I'm on the Mount Abe board, the school board. I'm also state representative along with Mari Cordes, serving Addison 4, and I serve on the House Education Committee, and then just recently was appointed to the VSAC board.
Thank you. Ben Putnam.
Hi everyone, I'm Bench Putnam. I live in New Haven. I have 2 kids in the school system, one at Beeman and one about to go into Mount Abe, and I serve on the New Haven Planning Commission. So that's about it.
Thank you. Rob Backlund.
Represent Lincoln on the MAUSD school board, and I'm also the father of a little girl who will be Lincoln Community School class of 31, and I believe Mount Abe class of 35, 30. Not up on my math at the moment. But.
Thank you. And my next person, I don't see your name, I just see your phone number. Starts with 860-752. If that's you, can you unmute and introduce yourself? So participant with the phone number 860-752, that's the number that's showing up. Is that ringing a bell? All right, we'll catch you at the end with people that don't get called on.
Sorry,
Michelle?
that's Sally Burrell. That's you, Sally.
I can't, okay, now I'm on mute. I guess it's because it's the ID for this call.
Oh.
Anyway.
Well, please take
not
a
my phone
moment
number.
to introduce yourself.
Great. I'm Sally Burrell. I've been living in the area. I'm in Bristol. I live in Bristol, and I'm the Energy Committee Chair of Bristol, and also sit in on the Community Engagement Committee for the district. Thanks.
Thank you. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Perley. I am the select board chair for Bristol. I'm a resident in Bristol. I've had 2 girls that went to Mount Abe, but my youngest one just graduated this year, so went through the spring fiasco. But interested in just hearing what's going to happen in the future and hopefully get some ideas.
Thank you. Sally Ober?
Hi, I'm Sally Ober. I am from Lincoln. I'm a parent of 2 girls who've gone through the Lincoln and high schools, and I'm the town clerk in Lincoln.
Thank you. Mark Bolts Robinson?
Yeah, hello, Mark Bolts Robinson. I'm a resident of Moncton. I am the chair of the Moncton Energy Committee, and that's my participation in this event. Although I'm also the chair of the Moncton Town Forest Committee, and I'm Moncton's tree warden. Didn't go through the schools here, been resident of Moncton for 2 to 3 years now, but I did grow up in Brandon and went through the Brandon Otter Valley, whichever school district system that is for Otter Valley and then Brandon schools.
Thank you. And I have the next person is labeled the Dashes.
Hi, I'm Mike Dash, and I'm here with my wife, Carolyn. We live here in Bristol and have 2 young kids, a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. And just excited to hear about the future of schools here.
Thank you. Christina McCullen.
Hi there. I'm on the Addison Northwest School District School Board, and I just wanted to join to listen in on your all of your conversations. Thank you.
Great. If I did not call on you, if you're on the Zoom call, can you please put your name in the chat?
Thank you so much, Shannon. And while you're waiting for that, let's go and do a quick round of introductions in the room. And so I think Shannon's going to be able to move the camera around. So
you got it.
Everybody. So
I have it, but I can't see what that camera's projecting up on that screen.
Christina, can you mute your microphone, please?
That is the
Oh, that ends the camera. Okay.
So why don't you go and we'll go.
Sure. So, good to go?
Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Patrick Green. I'm superintendent for MAUSD. I'm a Lincoln resident, and I have two children that are in Mount Abe here, a rising freshman and rising junior.
I'm Corey Cugino. I'm the chair of the Starkville Select Board, and I have a fourth grader and sixth grader, as well as an eighth grader here at Mount Abe.
If you can speak nice and loud.
Yeah, sure. I'm Mandy Chesley Park, the director of the Extended Learning Program for MAUSD. I graduated from Mount Abe in '97. I have a first, fourth, and fifth grader at Bristol Elementary School.
Hi, I'm Louis DuPont, live in Starksboro, and a former school board member from Starksboro, and then two daughters that graduated from both the elementary school and the high school. I'm just very interested in this difficult conversation.
I'm Mary Simmons. I'm on the Community Engagement Committee.
I'm John McNerney from Moncton. My son just graduated last spring, and a daughter who was about to start her sophomore year. I'm on the Moncton Select Board, and also classroom volunteer at MCS, sometimes here at Mount Abe, although I guess that won't be happening this year.
I'm Nancy Cornell. I'm a resident of Starksboro. I'm a former school board member for the Robinson School and the former associate superintendent of schools for the school district. I have grandchildren who are attending the preschool and Robinson School in the coming year. And I guess that's all. Oh, I'm also a member of the Community Engagement.
I'm Katrina Roberts. I have three daughters. The youngest, an incoming fourth grader at Moncton, and then an eighth grader here at Mount Abe and a sophomore here at Mount Abe. I'm also the president of the Moncton Central School PTO, and I'm a local realtor, so I'm interested in that aspect of the discussion.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Maher. I'm a member of the Community Engagement Committee. I'm also a parent. I have three daughters. Two have graduated, and my youngest is going into her senior year. And I'm also a teacher at Lincoln Community School, and this year I'll be starting also at Robinson School. And I'm the co-president of the Teachers Association.
Dr. as well, but I'm a Moncton representative to the Mount Abe chair. I have two sons who graduated from Mount Abe and are out in the world today.
Great, thank you. I'm Kristen and Cheryl. I have two high school students.
Thank you, everybody. I know that took a little bit of patience to hear from everyone, but I think it's really important for us to know who's, made the time to gather here and be with us tonight. And I really just want to encourage us to take advantage of the fact that you do have people here in this gathering who are not just affiliated with the schools, but with real estate and energy and select boards. And schools don't exist in a vacuum, right? They're part of the broader community. And so we're hoping that you can have a good conversation. And I think I don't want to spend too much more time before we get us right into our conversation. So the first thing that we want to do is talk a little bit in a pretty open way about what's happening right now. I think that's really important, right? And I'm trying to share my screen, so let's see if I can make that happen. So we have two suggested prompts, and what we're going to do is the people in the room are going to ask you to divide up by about 3 people. You're welcome to walk outside We're going to have about 15 minutes for this conversation. And for the people in the room, you might want to mix yourselves up so that the select board folks and the school folks have a chance to talk together. For our Zoom participants, we're going to break you into breakout rooms. It's going to be a random process, so hopefully you'll have some diversity in your group, although I can't guarantee it. So here are the 2 suggested questions that we're going to ask you to speak about. So first, we find in our work that when we can ground our policy conversations in personal experience, it always makes it work better. So we always start with the personal. And so we want to start by having you just take a minute to share with each other how you personally have been impacted by current events. So we have a pandemic, we have a racial justice movement, we have political polarization, all of this stuff is happening. So we just want you to talk with each other about how this has impacted you. And then we have another question that is going to ask you to look up a little bit more. And as many of us are aware, the pandemic has really laid bare some longstanding inequities in our country. And just as a Vermont example, right, we discovered that without schools, children often don't have enough to eat, right? And so we just want you to talk a little bit about how this awakening and realization is showing up here in your community. So what's happening in your communities in the 5 towns that is an example of what we're noticing around the country? Those 2 questions make sense? So I'm going to invite you all to split yourselves up. As I said, you're welcome to go outside, and we'll have about 15 minutes for this conversation. So I'd encourage you to try to get to both of those questions. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And the people on Zoom can be patient for just a moment. We're going to create some breakout rooms for you. And I just want to let you know that the breakout rooms can be a little bit abrupt. So we're going to let you know when it's time to come back together, and we'll send you a few messages along the way so you know what to expect. But eventually, the room is going to close and you'll all be dumped back here into the major room. So I'm going to create these right now, and you'll have 3 to 4 people in your room.
Do you need my help with this part at all?
That was not wanting to move the camera much. I was clicking away like,
yeah, I don't know.
Go find a group. I'll come and find people in about 15. I'd love to see a thumbs up or a thumbs up, sideways, or down for how your small group conversations went. Thumbs up. So I think we're just waiting for people in the room to come back together, and then we'll go on to the next part. Okay. So thanks everybody. I hope you had good conversations. What we'd like to do now is hear from a few of the groups. Shannon's going to call on a couple of people that are on Zoom, and we're going to invite a few people in the room to share a few highlights. And then we're going to actually do a group kind of brainstorm based on what we're hearing. And Krista is going to capture some of the major challenges and also some potential opportunities that people are thinking about and talking about. We'll share the screen when we do that so we can see kind of the group's thinking as it evolves. So we're going to start, Shannon, I think we'll have you invite some people on Zoom. So what we're asking you to do, and we want everyone to listen really carefully to each other so that when we go to that brainstorm, we have some good data to use to do that. So we want to know, what were some of the things that stood out about your conversation briefly? And when you're answering that question, we also want you to bring other voices in. So if your small group talked about something that is a concern or a challenge that you've also been hearing about in the broader community with the other folks you've been talking to, that's what we're particularly interested in hearing. So we'll have everybody kind of keep it to just a minute or two. and so we can get as many voices in the room as possible. So Shannon, I'll start with you.
Yep. Mark Bolts Robinson, can you or somebody from your group share some of the highlights of your conversation?
Sure. So I think, I hope I do the group justice for this because it was a good talk and everybody shared some really great insights. To summarize the general answers to kind of the questions and the thoughts we had as a group, the first was the food insecurity issue that was brought up, of course, which is an issue for Vermonters in general. Many of those that are, at or below the poverty line, and the schools being a source of providing the meals for a lot of children. Thought it was great the way the district was able to continue that through like a home delivery program. There was the inequality of the communication and the ability of students to be able to do the work from home learning for the households that have internet access versus households that don't. And that's also a broader community issue. How do the towns convey information for those who can't get Front Porch Forum, who can't get on Facebook? So the issues of, the lack of broadband internet coverage, and, elderly folks who are also more isolated because they aren't connected to the internet and never have been, and perhaps have a dislike of technology or just don't use it. Then the other inequality was in the those who are fortunate to be in trades like myself. I consider myself very privileged and blessed to be able to do work from home and have been work from home, versus those who work trades that and essential workers and all the rest who actually have to work or cannot work as a result of the pandemic, and the challenges that places on the home life, which brought up the I guess it's the fourth inequality, which is the safety issue of home safety, domestic violence, and not having an outlet or a way to get out from under that, to get counseling, to get assistance in those situations as much. And the close quarters kind of pressures that are put on, students and parents alike, I think would be the quick summary. As I guess it's quick. Hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Porter Knight, can you share for your group, please?
Sure. So we, several of us had noted the inequities raised by childcare challenges there. We also talked about the challenges of internet service, as was brought up, and just income inequality generally, and how people were able to weather this differently and had very different experiences. Let's see. I feel we started actually to sort of go down the road and talk about some solutions. We were noticing that access to food and food insecurity was a challenge that people were facing. And we also talked about the inequity of risk, that some frontline workers, particularly in low-income wage jobs, were in a position where they didn't have any capacity to protect themselves. So people who are working in sort of retail positions, for example, when faced with customers who didn't want to wear a mask or didn't want to follow the rules for occupancy in a store, and the clerks didn't have any authority, really couldn't do anything to protect themselves. Team, you want to weigh in? What did I leave out there?
I thought Sarah's point about the employers, different employers had different types of capacity related to their business to support their employees, and also understand how they could get assistance. I thought that was an interesting point as well.
I'll call for someone in the room and we'll go back to you, Shannon. Does somebody from one of the groups in the room want to volunteer to share some highlights from your group's conversation? And can you speak nice and loud so our friends on Zoom can hear?
Hi, I'm Katrina. Inequalities that came up in many different situations, but specifically with special needs children, that students that might already have challenges, and then just access to them during this time was very, very difficult. We talked about how that the inequality of technology, and then we also talked a little bit about the inequality of age. So for families like mine and many others, you might have a high school student that weathered this very differently than a second grader or a third grader. So in addition to the food insecurities and safety areas like that, I think special needs, technology, and maybe age disparity.
So the next person, if we could have them move closer to the microphone and speak up, that would be great. It gives feedback. We did try that earlier today. Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a bit of feedback, but I think if whoever's speaking just comes closer and speaks up, we'll be okay.
Let's have one more person and then we'll go back.
Yeah, I think more of what you've already heard, particularly just economically challenged families where there were hairline cracks in our society. They're now gaping crevices where kids are falling through, and food insecurity, internet variability, parents trying to work. Just the realization that, oh yeah, school is not only educating our kids, but it's allowing most of our young parent-aged workers to work. So I think we also agreed that we need to advocate with the state, because a $1 penalty, $1 over the threshold, that's crazy. I'm sure I missed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, from our Zoom rooms, Sally Burrell, would you like to share what your group talked about?
It's similar to what you've all talked about. The inequity around income was a big one. That was the main thing. We did kind of go off in some different directions, but I'm trying to think if there's anything different than what has been said. Richard, do you happen to have anything?
No, I think most of what we talked about has been covered by others as well too. It's the food insecurity and the recognition that essential workers have not been valued in society until this happened, and now we know who really is essential. But besides that, I think the other topics were covered. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think what we'll do now, since it sounds like we are hearing some of the same things, Krista has been taking some notes as we've been listening to you. And I'm just going to share the screen again and just give you an opportunity to see if there's anything that your group talked about that's not reflected here. We can go ahead and add those. So let me share this here. So some key concerns that we're hearing: food insecurity, internet access, income inequality, inequality at risk, childcare. You can read through this list. The impact of this experience on different ages of children. Families who were struggling before are now struggling even more. And then a recognition of the role that our schools play in ensuring people can work and providing support to kids and food. Are there any other challenges that you've been hearing about in the broader community or that you heard about tonight that didn't make it on this list yet?
So Caleb had his hand up, and also in the chat we have access to technology, a question about where does systemic racism fit in, affordable housing, and access to healthcare. Caleb, do you want to share your thoughts? I saw your hand up.
Well, I'm glad to see Kim's there. Mine had to do with access to healthcare. That I thought Cheryl and our group had a really important point, that the disparity between access to healthcare and for childcare workers is so different than for workers within our school district, and particularly with the asks that were made of childcare workers during this pandemic. That's a pretty stark, contrast. So I wanted to highlight that.
And a couple others from the chat: access to resources in general, where to start looking for what you need, understanding how to use the technology you may have access to, wages and workers' compensation, increase in mental health and substance use. And Paul Forlenza, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things I talked about in our group is, while we're struggling with all these issues on a personal and a family basis, at least for this meeting, we've been identified as leaders in the community. And so what responsibilities do we have in the community, and how do we address them when there are so many unknowns?
Thank you. And additional thoughts, social services and the needs for that, and fear and anxiety around unemployment and things of that nature causing issues and frustration. Transportation.
Age-related, well, my daughter will be driving by October. After school things going on, a lot of people don't come to school.
Yep, so access to transportation, not just the bus into school, but also home for after school activities.
Just to underscore something that we said. So now the world sees, or at least our state sees, the essential role that schools play, not only in educating kids, but in enabling people to work. In light of that, there's a disconnect between penalizing schools financially for the loss of kids in light of the incredible role and multiple roles that schools play in our community, in our society. So that's a message that needs to get to the legislature really quickly.
Great. Any other big ideas that are missing? Go ahead.
I was just going to add access to protective adults. So students or children who were in homes, and we've already heard that reports diminished very quickly for abuse. And, you know, as the director of the expanded learning program, certainly we're seeing the need, and we're starting the torch of making the reports now. But access to protective adults.
I wanted to add that disparities in different families' abilities to fill in the gaps during the pandemic and even going back to school. So recognizing the privilege for lots of folks to be able to develop learning pods or transportation carpools or expanded learning that they can pay for versus those folks who can't do that, and the recognition that that's just going to continue to widen the achievement gap.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Also, having an older
state, I think using, you know, older people and how it's impacted them in terms of isolation and how we can hear also that if they were one of the most vulnerable population, rather than a lot of those issues.
Can you come a little closer and just repeat the highlights of what you said? I think it was important, but the folks at home couldn't hear.
The one I just spoke about, the elders in our communities and just the issues that they face with this in terms of isolation, or difficulty getting support around things, even just healthcare issues that would come up, and just the fact that they were the most vulnerable population too. And so I think the fear that they lived with during this was pretty remarkable.
So, do you want to speak? Come on closer.
I'm concerned a little that some of our social services safety net, particularly things done by volunteers or community-based, aren't up to what's coming this fall, particularly when the heating season comes. I help coordinate Moncton's firewood donation program. We've got less wood than we've had any other year because we haven't been able to organize the community work days. And I suspect we're going to have more demand for it come heating season. And I suspect that that's just the tip of the iceberg of things that are going to be affected in some way by this. And some of them may not know how badly they're going to be affected yet.
So this is a pretty heavy list, so we'll just take a moment and acknowledge that, right? And I think Chris at the beginning said, we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime, right? So this, we just have to acknowledge this is the moment. Given that, we do want to, again, take the advantage of the fact that there's so many people here together with different perspectives and hats, and see if there are some possibilities that people could come up with for specific actions that might lend themselves well to a collaboration among the select board people and school leaders, for example, or other coalitions to work on. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one more little breakout session, and I think we'll again randomly break people and Zoom up, and you all can go back to your original groups or mix it up. We're going to mix up people and Zoom, and we're just going to ask each group to come up with one idea about an action that the communities might take collaboratively, kind of help things here to the best of your ability. So we're looking for one really specific thing. And I just want to let you know, we're going to capture this, and we'll share a link to this document so you can all see your work that you generated tonight. I did want to just let you know, we did include some action ideas already from the work of the Community Engagement Committee last fall. And these may not be as relevant right now, but we just think it's really important to build on the energy that we heard previously. And so one is a task force to improve demographics and attract families to the area. One is to explore specific opportunities for school community partnership, and one was to do some advocacy in the legislature for changes in education policy. Those were three areas that we heard last fall from the community where there was some energy around collaborative work. So I just wanted to let you know we already have captured those. And so we're going to ask your groups to each come bring back one idea. It does not have to have anything to do with schools at all, or it can have to do with the school district and the school system. So that's totally up to your group. And just keeping in mind that kind of daunting list of challenges that we just generated, what is it that you think is maybe a key thing? So we're going to do about 10 minutes. Does 10 minutes sound like enough? Or do you want 15? What do people think looking at this? 10 minutes? Thumbs up for 10 minutes? Okay. So we'll have you come back in 10 minutes, and we're going to try to hear from every group. So narrow it down to one thing so that we can do that in a way that doesn't take too long, get too difficult. Okay? So we'll see you back here in a little bit. And on Zoom, if you're patient for just a moment, I'm going to form some breakout rooms. Definitely energized the people in this room because the volume just went up. So I'm curious to hear how your conversations on Zoom went. what we would like to do, we're going to do this really fast, is hear one idea from each group, because we really want to get out all the ideas from all of the groups. And Krista's going to collect the ideas. And I'm going to ask everybody in the room and on Zoom, if you prefer to see the ideas as they're being written down, I want you to give a thumbs up. If you prefer to see the pictures of people talking and look at the ideas later, I want you to give a thumbs down. So the thumbs up is seeing the document with the ideas. The thumbs down is seeing people's, not thumbs down, thumbs sideways is seeing people's faces, okay? So let's see, thumbs up, the document, thumbs sideways, the faces. It's really split. We're gonna start with faces and then we'll switch to the document. How's that? Okay, we'll split the difference. So let's start, this time we'll start from hearing from groups in the room. I hear there were 4 groups in this room. So why don't we see if, would you like to start? Go ahead and start. And just come near the.
So what our one idea was that for our students who may be home some days, that we engage them in service, that we look at the needs, and that part of their academic work be doing something for the community in a very intentional way, with learning about what that's like, thinking about all it involves, taking all the precautions,
Great.
but having it
So
noted in that
create
way.
service opportunities for students who are at home. Okay, another group from this room. Nancy? Come on up.
This is kind of like cheating, but you listed basically increase enrollment. So that's our one idea, and we had 5 different ideas about how to do that.
Okay, you will capture those.
Okay.
You can share this with us after the meeting, and we'll get all of those.
Okay.
Okay, that's great.
So what John and I talked about was coming up with spreadsheets to help families with transportation, various other clothing in the winter. Like somehow could there be a centralized place to help families in each town even figure out where can their kids be when they're working on a Wednesday and their kids are off. So just somehow centralizing information to help families deal with everything.
Awesome, thank you. This side of the room. What other groups did you have? Go ahead.
I think we talked about a lot about advocating in the legislature and having a lot of the things that we've talked about being heard in Montpelier, not just in the small towns. I think we were torn a little bit about what we would actually want to get out, and I think especially as it relates to taxes, we were concerned that some of the things that we might advocate for that would help us would also be a detriment to bringing in young families and would affect affordability. So I think we were really torn about that. So I think if we could think about that a little deeper, that would be important. One other thing that we noted is I think I'm on the select board in Starksboro, and I feel like we kind of make our budgets in a bubble. So we're often pitting the school against the town. It's the school's fault or it's the town's fault. And I think ultimately I wish there was a way, Dawn actually expressed it better than I can, but of making sure that we're not pitting each other against each other and we're communicating through that budget process.
So a more kind of collaborative budget process.
Yes. So I know that was 2 things, but.
Great, thank you. Any other group in this room that we didn't hear from? Okay, great. So now
I'd
we're
love
going
to see the healthcare situation just cleaned up and taken care of. Take the burden off the schools, take the burden off the business providers, make sure that everybody has equitable access to healthcare.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cheryl. So now we're going to ask to hear from each of the groups on Zoom. And if you had an idea that was very similar to one that was already spoken, then we let us note that, and Crystal will make a note of that. So, and Crystal, you added Cheryl's idea. So Shannon, help us make sure we get to all our groups.
So we're going to start with room 1. That was Bay's group. So Bay, if you want to speak, or somebody else from that group.
Yeah, sure. So we definitely talked about how the community can show up for each other when we're faced with the inequity of internet access and what that might look like in terms of people power, which is a challenging thing to get convince people to volunteer. But then the other big thing was this concept that's been spinning around a little bit around, the Bristol hub in town is such a great resource for a lot of the high school students. And, what would it take, what would it look like to incorporate that kind of hub energy in the smaller towns? Like Lincoln has Lincoln Sports, and there's the Bristol Rec Department. So sort of leaning on these other organizations that exist that are, partially funded by the towns, and what that might look like to create some sort of a reallocation of other funding that's out there that's not adding to taxes. Corin, like what you were saying, I agree. It's hard. We don't want to put the pressure on the taxes, but bringing something together that creates a resource center, but also an actual location for students on their days that they're home to have access to hugs and other things.
Thank you.
Room 2 was the room that had Betsy in it. So Betsy or somebody from that group?
We talked about a few different things. I think healthcare was already touched on, but the need for healthcare for everyone people shouldn't have to worry how to pay for healthcare. That was one big thing. We also talked about how we can get information to people in the community about community resources. I think that was already touched upon as well. And another thing we talked about was resiliency and how we can all become more resilient. Sally in our group mentioned there's an online course she's taking that's been really helpful. So if any of you in my group want to add to that, please feel free.
All right, thank you. Room 3, Adora. Is there somebody else from room 3?
Yeah, I can speak. So we talked about a few different things. One of the things we talked about was the equity issues around variable internet access and how that kind of impacted student learning. We did talk also about kind of a centralized resource mechanism, like maybe a website where people could become more aware of resources, support resources of various kinds. And that would be updated in real time, a very current resource list of some kind.
Thank you. Room 4 with Cheryl.
Well, I already talked about healthcare, but we spend a lot of time talking about converting our facilities into really community care and learning centers. So things like bringing dialysis or primary care into the buildings, making sure that our elders had a place where they were safe, starting from pre-K and going through, maybe it was a work site for high school students or college students to be doing on-site learning, and really just using them as community resources that might then increase the vitality so that we get more young families wanting to move to those communities. And so Sarah and Marie add something.
Thank you. Room 5 with Steve.
We talked about our jobs and good paying jobs to keep our students here in order to get young people to stay in the state. We've got to give them opportunities to earn a living wage. Housing prices, what apartments and houses are doing. that's not making it affordable again for young people. So those are a couple of the major points that we talked about.
Thank you. Room 6 with Darla.
Hi. So we had talked about a couple of things. We talked about childcare. We talked about helping businesses. We talked about supporting our schools now and the need for that more than ever, because they're asked to do so many more things than they ever have been before. And that was brought to the forefront when we talk about essential workers and essential care. But what we boiled it down to was the need for more meetings like this with multiple communities coming together as one, as one space. So focus on particular 5 town committees that would focus on particular issues and looking at the 5 towns as a whole. If anyone else from my group wants to fill in anything.
So I think that's yeah, exactly that. It's the idea of it's not a governance thing, but it's like a idea of something like this can be unwieldy with a really big group, but 5 towns, a 5 towns group of people coming together to on a regular basis to continue to work on all of the different problems and ways in which they can be solved, pulling ideas from representation from and fostering the communication of the groups, as well as being able to also meet in smaller pockets, smaller groups, and then coming together less frequently as a bigger group, but doing so on a very regular basis, kind of stitch things together between and share ideas and, kind of work on the general problems, all of them.
Thanks, Mark.
Room 7 with Katrina.
We definitely stayed in the economic topic for sure. We talked a lot about income inequalities, worrying about the unemployment money going away and how can other things happen so that people have some sense of relief. We did start a little bit to talk about creating more jobs in our 5-town area as well, and that's as far as we got, unless Michelle or Taylor remembers something else.
Thank you. Room 8 with Susan.
I think I'm going to report for that group. So let's see. We talked about kind of at a higher level, kind of continue to reach out to organizations and businesses to just continue to try to get a sense for where people are from different perspectives, not just our school district perspective. We heard about the desire, again, to do events like this, to have this type of participation in, kind of town by towns as a just potential way to build consensus and have conversations like this right now. We talked about meeting families where they are. Just there's such a diversity of situations right now, and that expressing. I know I expressed that just a gratitude that our school district is coming up with a plan for school this fall that is multifaceted and tries to balance things, and also just that tries to meet families really, hopefully, where they are in terms of having a remote option, for example. Some districts are really not trying to do that. We pivoted a little bit to try to talk about just the here and now impending financial train coming down the tracks or already down the tracks. And so, that was touched on earlier with excess spending thresholds and things like that. I had a comment that I do believe we need to have a bill to address not only the equalized pupil weights, but really the whole finance system, which is designed during a period of prolonged population growth and has a punitive element to it that I don't think was intended. Now that we're 30 years into population decline, that may change, but I just think the way it was designed is not for where we are, and the math is kind of cruel, and I don't think it was meant to be that way. So I think kind of trusting local. Anyway, I won't go down that, but we did talk about that. Let's see. But I think other things people mentioned, but no, I think that captures it. Please, anyone from the group chime in if I missed something.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We promised to share the, excuse me, the list. So it's a long list. You generated a lot of ideas. And thank you to Krista for capturing all of those. And what I noticed is some of these are very specific ideas, like creating spreadsheets to help families. And then some of the items here are more kind of issues that people care about. And so one thing I'll suggest is just working with this list a little bit and really identifying the actionable ideas. And also doing maybe a little poll so that maybe tomorrow people that were in this meeting can just see if there's anything on here that feels really important that you would personally want to get behind and be willing to spend some time and energy on. So I'll suggest that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Krista with a couple of more next steps. And I just want to, go ahead, did you have a? Can you?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm wondering what we're doing to create or expand outdoor classroom space and to extend the usefulness of that as far as we can into the fall. And also, if we move quick enough, we could probably get community volunteers to help create that. It might be a great way to buffer some of the start of the school year anyway. It doesn't work in the business.
Thank you. So we capture that as a question. Okay, great. So before I hand it over to Krista, I want to thank you all. This is really hard doing this, and you were all really patient at the beginning and the long introductions. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of you taking time for this kind of reflective conversation. When there's so much urgency, sometimes it's hard to step back and think a little bit more long term, but I think it's really important for our communities. So I thank all of you for being here, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it. And now Krista's going to talk about the next steps.
Ms. Coulter, just want to take this.
Okay. How's this? Can everybody hear me okay on Zoom? Okay. All right. So I feel really energized and excited about this group of folks that are part of this conversation. And to sort of help us think about next steps, my first question, and I think it was an action item that several different groups brought up, is do we want to do this again? So I guess I'll take a page from Sue's facilitation practices to say, if you think that a group like this should meet again in some way, shape, or form, thumbs up. And if you're not sure or don't think so, then I guess maybe thumbs sideways. So I'd like to just get a sense of that appetite for this kind of conversation continuing. Okay, so it seems like most of us feel like this is something that should continue. So the other question, and I don't know if we want to try to capture that somehow or just ask this of ourselves and be thinking about this, is who's missing that needs to be at this table? The Community Engagement Committee thought up a lot of the names of folks that we knew personally or knew of that we thought would be good to reach out to, and most of you said yes. But this isn't inclusive of all of the people in our community that perhaps should have a voice here. So I think that's something we need to mull over and keep thinking about. And then the last question is, who would like to be part of leading this work moving forward? So I'm a action-oriented person who has a hard time when there's no closure at the end of a gathering, but I think maybe we're not going to have that right now. Although if you feel especially compelled to be part of leading a smaller conversation of a particular area of interest, please let us know either here in person or in the chat. But what I will commit to doing is sending out an email to everyone who participated after this with the notes that we generated and with these 3 questions, so that you can think about what it might look like to be part of an ongoing conversation, whether that's a large group convening, smaller groups convening, or some combination of the two. So I think I'm going to take a deep breath and be okay with leaving it at that and recognize that it's 9:04, so we're past the time when we said we would close. And I'll just finish by saying thank you again. I feel really proud to be part of this community and energized by our commitment to communicating and collaborating. And that's an amazing start and really our primary goal for this evening. So unless Sue or Shannon have anything else to add, I think that's about it.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, so thanks again, folks, and we'll make copies of the chat dialogue as well as the document, and that will go out to all of you by email. All right, have a great evening, everyone.